So, this morning, well, you might be a bit confused because I got it wrong. So this morning is part 1, and I thought for some reason I was doing part 1 this morning, part 2 this evening, but I've never done that anyway. So I'm afraid I'm going to leave you on a little bit of a cliffhanger, and you'll have to wait till tomorrow. But that's fine. Keep them engrossed. I'll do that voice. Previously on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I want us this morning. It's quite a hard topic in some ways, I suppose, but I think it's right to not shy away from some of the harder ones. I want us to try and gauge that big picture, that idea that where we are at the moment doesn't necessarily mean it's the end. There was a line in the song that we sang this morning, "Blessed be your name." Wherever we are, wherever part of life's journey we are on, we're still saying, "Blessed be his name." And I thought we'd start with a little game. I've prepped Olivia. She's doing an awesome job. So, basically, there is a zoomed-in picture. Can you guess? Can you guess what it is? Nice and easy. I won't even ask for hands up. Let's be rebellious. Next one. Oh, you're good. Okay. Ease you in.
Apple.
Oh, he's good. Have you read my notes? Very good. Yeah?
He's never ate one in his life.
No, let's not get personal. A train. Yeah, we'll give you that one because it's the very first Harry Potter book, which came out in 1997. That's crazy. Next one.
Roller coaster.
Which one?
Big one.
I mean, you are good at. Have you played this before? It is, yeah. I'm not sure I'd go on it just based on that. No, it's all right. Don't worry. Next. I don't know why I do these games. People guess them too easy. Yeah. There we are. Next one.
Eiffel Tower.
Seriously. It hadn't even come on the screen. Yeah, Eiffel Tower.
I think
Next one. I don't know if you can see, sorry. Yes, finally. It's not in this country, if that helps.
Is it the Sagrada Familia?
It is, yeah. Sagrada Familia. There you are.
I just got engaged.
Ah, good. Well done on getting that one. If anyone gets this, then you really have been reading my notes. The only person I expect to get this is Olivia, because she's already seen it. Oh, yeah?
Megan.
Oh, very close. The other one. Yes, very good. There we are. So, there she is. And last but not least, I think. No. Seriously, you need to as a church, I think you need to go on some form of game show because that is astounding. It is, yeah. Wow. Okay. Let's see what's next. Yeah, that's fine. Leave that. I've got here on my notes. It's sometimes hard to tell, isn't it, when we're close up? But I don't think that applies to you because you've got every single one of them. But just going back to that quote there, the artist sees what others only catch a glimpse of. And there's a lot of truth in that, isn't there? That sometimes we're so bogged down by what life throws at us that we can't always see where we're going. And this morning I want us to think about where's God in the trials? Where is God in the suffering? Why do we have to go through them? And I'm not going to stand here and try and provide an answer to the question, that age-old thing, if God is an all-loving God, why is there suffering in the world? Because minds much better than mine have tried to answer that and haven't really. But what is it that those valley moments can teach us? And we're going to do that this morning by looking at probably one of the most, if not the most famous psalm of them all, Psalm 23. It will be up on the screen if you want to follow. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right path for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And pray that God might speak to us through that this morning. The first point is this. We have all that we need. Verse 1, we lack nothing. My head teacher was giving a speech this week at an event in which he said this: the only constant in education is change. And there's probably quite a lot of truth in that. And I'm not going to go get political on you because I have my own views on education, and this isn't the place for that. But also, I think it's important to remember that the one constant that we have is God. Things change, situations change, contexts change, people change. But God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I remember when I went off to university, and it's funny really, we talked a bit about that song, Blessed Be Your Name. That was the first song I played on my radio. Blimey, is it that old? And I just remember thinking that even though I had all these things that were unfamiliar in York, that I was on the other side of the Pennines and I had to do my own cooking and my own washing and make friends and probably do a bit of studying. Yeah, exactly, a bit. And the one thing that had stayed the same was that God was still there. And that provided a massive source of comfort for me. But it's hard to sometimes realise that. You see, there's an interesting dynamic when you work with teenagers in trying to get them to realise what they need and what they want. They're very different. And to be fair, probably we're the same as adults in some way, shape or form. But God is the God that is there in the hills and the valleys. He is the God that gives us all that we need. How do we keep trusting? How do we keep believing when we've had that disappointment, when we've had that idea of being downtrodden, when we feel just isolated and left? Where is God? Why has he abandoned us? Why is he not answering our prayers? Why did that have to happen? How can we then say that God is all that we need? But it says in the book of Hebrews, this verse. It doesn't say that verse. That's another book. Sorry, that's my fault. I've forgotten about that. I think the premise of all of this is this wonderful, wonderful book for children that has so much truth in it. How many times do we think we have to go over it? How many times do we have to go under it? Whereas actually, no, we've just got to go through it. It's hard, it's painful, it's heartbreaking, often. But that is where we are, and that's what we do. And in another book, the Bible, it says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. I spend a lot of time on the M60, not out of choice, just because I happen to live in a place where I need to use that road quite a lot. And in January, earlier this year, I'd gone to a Leavers Do for a member of our staff. So we'd gone for some drinks, and I'd left quite early. I'd left at about 10 to 11, and I'd gone to get on the motorway. And I got to the motorway, and I couldn't get on my junction because they'd shut it. Lovely. And I couldn't even go cross-country because they'd shut that. So we lived near the Trafford Centre, and I ended up going towards Bury to try and get back to the Trafford Centre. And I got onto the motorway heading towards the M62, and it was static. 20 past 11 on a Friday night. I got home at 20 to 2 in the morning, and it was hard. It was interesting, actually, because you could see the ones that drove down the outside and then cut in, those that just thought, you know what, we're going nowhere, let's put the music up and have a rave. Those that weren't very impressed and did the relevant gestures. Those that just kind of were really fed up. And I just sat there, and there was this, I think I listened to the CD in the car about 4 times by the time I got home. It just went round and round. But there was this one song that kept saying, seasons come and go, but you remain the same. You know, in that same week at school, a girl her house had burnt down. Her dad had been admitted to hospital with pneumonia, and then her grandma had been scanned out of all her life savings. And you know what? Sometimes I just had to stop and get some perspective. Yes, it was horrible. It was Friday night. I wanted to go home. Yes, I should have gone to the bathroom before I left the establishment. Yes, I probably should have had more petrol in my car than I did. But I was safe. I had a car. I was going home. And sometimes that's really, really hard. How do we see that bigger picture? Sometimes it feels like we're stuck in the same place. But maybe that's where God wants us to be at that time. I don't know about you, but I often call out to God when things are going wrong rather than when things are going right. This morning, there was many a plea to try and find my contact lens on the bathroom floor. I sometimes yell at God. I get angry at God. Some of the things that I've experienced, some of the things I hear the pupils that I work with talk about. How can that happen? And you know what is really reassuring is that if you read the Psalms, you'll just see people that get angry at God. But also you see people realise that God is bigger and God will guide us through those things when we need to. Some of the Psalms are so blunt, so heartfelt, so desperate that it's clear that the author wasn't always having the best time. It's a dark world out there sometimes. I had a pupil come to me and she was concerned that she was hearing noises in the house. So Mum decided to bring in a medium. And that was, like, I couldn't believe that. Like, that really shocked me because I didn't expect that. This is also a girl that goes to a church. And I was like, what? How? Yeah, what? And over time, she actually came to the point of what the noises were and she worked it out. But also I was able to kind of, in some small way, direct her towards God, being there for her in the darkness. See, life, to quote Ronan Keating, is a roller coaster. I'm sorry for using that. In the last week of school term, we had just, on the Sunday night, we'd invited my mum and dad round and Bexy's mum and dad round, and we'd just told them that they were going to be grandparents. And it was beautiful, because it had been a time of waiting, and it was lovely. That Sunday night I was going to France with school on a trip, and it was one of the best trips I've ever been on. It was fantastic. The pupils were brilliant, played loads of Uno, I won, so it was great, and life was brilliant. And then on the Wednesday I got a phone call saying that a member of our staff had had a cardiac arrest on the school trip, on the coach, in front of all the pupils, that he was unconscious and that he'd been taken to hospital. And I was in France after all these things. And I was like, why? Why God? And sadly, this was the Wednesday of the last week of term. Come Sunday, he'd passed away. And that was really, really hard. But God was this constant. And I'll come back to that in a minute about where God was in that. The imagery that's used in this psalm is that of a sheep. You know what? Sheep are pretty useless, to be honest, in a lot of ways. They are completely dependent upon the shepherd. And that's exactly how it should be, for provision, guidance, protectance. And sometimes, however painful it might be, that's the place we need to come back to. That actually, we can't do it all on our own. I try and do that at times, and it's amazing how God humbles me in one way or another. When we rely on ourselves instead of God, it just doesn't work. His ways are far higher and wiser than our own. And throughout the Bible, Jesus is referred to as the Good Shepherd in John 10 and 11, the Great Shepherd in Hebrews 13 and 20, and the Head Shepherd in 1 Peter 5, verse 4. He's the one who's with us in everything. He is our everything. He is all that we need. Second point this morning is this. He is our comforter. I sometimes find it really hard to acknowledge where God is in a situation. And a while back, I watched this clip, and this speaks for itself. It's brilliant. It's superb. Or at least it would be. Take my word for it. That's fine. I mustn't have downloaded it properly. That's fine. We'll leave. Right. Well, basically, in that clip, it's not Blackness, the best film you've ever watched. It's Justin Welby, and it's Pete Greig. Some of you may know who Pete Greig is. He's a brilliant speaker, really passionate guy, and teacher. And he's written loads of books on prayer. He's also had a really difficult life himself, he and his wife. He's written a book called God on Mute. It's a fantastic read. I encourage you to read that if you're struggling. But in this clip that I was going to play, he says this: so often we want him to airlift us out of our problems, but God more often parachutes in. Isn't that wonderful? That actually we want to escape it all, and God says, I'm coming with you to guide you through. I used to work with a young lad. He now lives in Glasgow with his wife, and they were expecting this time last year, and everything was going really well until just literally a year ago, a couple of days ago, and their little child was born still, and it was heartbreaking. It was really, really hard, and we went to the celebration service of that life in March this year. And it was raw, it was emotional, it was also beautiful. But at one moment, Sam, the guy, he hadn't shown any emotion. He's quite a private guy. And after the service had finished, he just went, understandably. And you know what happened? His dad, who's probably Jack the lad, the guy that makes a joke about everything, the guy, he just went to him, no words, and he just hugged him. Is that not what God does with us? When it all goes Pete Tong, when it all goes wrong, when it all seems to make no sense, God comes in and hugs us. Matt Lucado says this: he is not so far above us that he can't see our tears. Instead, often, he's there weeping with us. We've got to remember, I think, sometimes that this is not the world God envisaged. It was good when it started. We messed it up. Then it all went a bit wrong. So God kind of paid the ultimate price. But we're still living in a world that wasn't meant to be this way. And one day, I honestly believe that every tear will be wiped away, and all pain will cease, and all suffering will end. But until then, we just cope with God being with us. He's not abstract, he's not absent. In fact, very often, he's present. Sometimes we call out to God in distress rather than in times of excess. And we're not the first, we won't be the last, but it's hard. And you know what? Crying out to God doesn't necessarily mean that what you're going through will stop. In my experience, it's not the case. In fact, it normally carries on, but God uses things to teach you about it. I love this verse in Isaiah 40, verse 10 to 11, because this just, to me, sums up who God is. See, the sovereign Lord comes with power, and he rules with a mighty arm. See, his reward is with him, and his recompense accompanies him. And then this, just look at the contradiction in these two verses. He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those that have young. If we tried to sit here and understand who God is, we'd never make it. Because those two verses are as far apart as you could ever imagine. But that is the very nature of God, that he is above everything and yet with us in everything. And that's hard sometimes to remember. When life gets too much, it's that Footprints poem, isn't it? Then we look around, God, where are you? You've abandoned us. And he just goes, no, I was carrying you. It's hard though, it really is. He is the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, creator and perfecter. And yet the last words of a well-known hymn say this: he's shepherd, brother, friend, prophet, priest and king. My Lord, my life, my way, my end. Accept the praise I bring. And I thought about these two verses as I was preparing. And I remember when I held Joseph, my nephew, for the very first time. I thought I was going to drop him, not going to lie. which isn't a good idea. In fact, a few weeks ago, we were on top of the Great Orme, and I was throwing him up like you were doing. I slipped. He nearly went absolutely flying. I've not done it since. I'm a little bit scared. But I remember when he was born, and I held him on my shoulder, and there was just something so poignant about someone my size holding something. He wasn't that big. That big. And to me, that is exactly what God does. He holds us in our most helpless state, in our most needy of places. God is there holding us. As I was writing this, the words of a song by Matt Redman came on to the music I was listening to, and it says, "You never let go. Through the calm and through the storms, you never let go." I was talking before about how we lost that member of staff right at the start of the summer holidays, so obviously people couldn't really grieve. 5 weeks into the summer holidays, I got another phone call. One of our Year 11s had lost his life. He'd been on holiday in Vienna, and like so many people, gone for a swim in the lake, got into trouble, couldn't be rescued. His cousin had jumped in after him. He got into trouble. He lost his life. And you know what? What can you do? You know what was the hardest thing was I knew that when I went back to school, I always start off the year with a prayer and a little thought, trying to inspire people. And I knew I had that job this year because I knew the head teacher was elsewhere on something. And I wrestled and I wrestled and I wrestled with that. And in the end, I just stood there, because when people see you as a chaplain, they think, oh, he's got all the answers. If they met me, they'd know I hadn't. And I remember just kind of being honest with them and just saying, I have no idea why this has happened. But let's pull together. Let's work together. Let's be together. I went to the lad's funeral, and it's like nothing I've ever been to. It started at 10:30 and it finished at 1:30. He was a member of the Indian Orthodox Church. Bet you never heard of that, have you? Neither had I. And you know what? It was hard, but what was really reassuring was that they had faith that one day they will see him again. And I clung on to that, because when it's hard, you have to cling on to those things that just keep you going. It says in Romans, a beautiful verse, that when we don't have the words, the Spirit groans for us. So much time we need to kind of just rely on that. I'm going to try and play you another clip, but it might not work depending on the last one, so we'll see. Would you mind just trying and press play? It might be, if you do. I might not have set the thing up. If you... Is it not? Is there nothing there? It's fine if there's nothing there. It's fine. I've obviously not put it in the right place. It's all right. It's okay. Don't worry. This is why I try not to be technical, because it doesn't work. It's fine. We'll leave it. But in this clip was, have you ever heard of the Brownlee brothers, the triathletes? Well, basically, Johnny is running around. I can't remember. I think it's in somewhere like the Philippines or somewhere like that, and he's just about, he's on course to become first, and his legs and his body just go completely. The fatigue gets to him, the mental stamina is not there, and his legs go. He starts running like this, looks like me dancing on a Friday night, and he just gets to a point where he can't go anymore. But then his brother's behind him, runs up, puts his arm over him, and makes him run all the way to the finish line. Just before the finish line, he gives him a massive shove, which probably didn't help him because he was absolutely in a bad place, but so that he came before him. It's a bit like that Derek Redmond. Do you remember when his father ran on? This is the modern version, because all the I try and keep up to date. But it's a beautiful moment, and that's what God does. When we're at our weakest moment, He carries us on through to that. It's all right. I tried to mess with it last night and obviously messed too much. There we are. But Tim Keller, if you says this: we are saved by Christ alone, by faith alone, but not by a faith which remains alone. A lot of truth in that. Nothing we could do could make him love us less. Nothing we could do, could make him love us more. And actually there is so much more truth in that. And the final point is this. If you just go back one, I think. Yeah, thank you. Blessed to overflowing. See, when times get hard, it's important to remember what we already have. Because if we look to where we're trying to go and try and understand what we're going through, though there'll be pain, though there'll be tears, we need to kind of come back to that. The words of an old hymn say, on Christ, this solid rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. And there's a lot of truth in that, isn't there? Jesus tells the story of the foolish man who built his house on sand, and the floods of life come and it just gets wiped away. Whereas the wise man had built it on a rock. And although it was eroded and though it was battered, it stood firm. I love this quote. Don't think of the things you didn't get after praying. Think of the countless blessings God gave you without asking. See, we are blessed. We thought this morning, didn't we, about the value that we have, the love that God shows to us. That never changes, that never deviates, that never withers. It is there all the time. And I think it's really important that above everything, when we're in the valleys, we need to remember that God is a God who knows suffering. God is a God who sent his only Son to a cross, the most brutal death you could ever imagine, in order that we might have life in all its fullness. Psalm 30 says this: weeping may last through the night, but joy comes in the morning. Doesn't say how long that night is. Doesn't say how long it will go on for. But there's a promise of joy on its way. I believe it's no coincidence that I am the speaker this year. I got asked probably around this time last year, maybe, because you're always organised. And we didn't know at that moment that we would be expecting little popsicle, is what we called it. When we were here last time, I shared a bit about Bexy's road on how we got into teaching and how much of a struggle that was, and everything that we had to go through, and how God had just provided a massive, massive miracle. But I also shared how we were struggling to have a family of our own. And Chris and Donna, after that one, had prayed with us. And that was 3 years ago. And we didn't know. And then, obviously, we've come back this year. And God has answered that prayer. And you know what? It's been a painful journey, but a necessary one too. Because we couldn't care whether that's a boy or a girl. We couldn't care what it's going to be called in some respects, because we're just so thankful that God has honoured that prayer. That God has given us a precious life, a little miracle from God himself. There's been tears, there's been struggles. Imagine there'll be struggles to come when I'm getting up at 4 a.m. You won't want to cross me. But I love this, and I kind of just come into land this morning with this quote, which says, we are too prone to engrave our trials in marble and write our blessings in sand. How true is that? When going gets tough, it's so hard, and we moan and we moan and we moan. How many times do we get up and go, God loves me? How many times do we go up and go, I'm a child of God? How many times do we go, I have a job? How many times do we go, I have a family? How many times do we go, we have food? We have so many blessings. In a few weeks, we'll celebrate the incarnational nature of God. God contracted to a span, the most colossal power in the universe, in the most helpless of conditions. But you know what? We shouldn't just remember that at Christmas, because actually, Emmanuel, God is with us, is relevant for 365 days of the year. That actually, through every circumstance, through every trial, through every valley, God is with us. A bit random. Why is he telling us to eat together? Well, what I like about that is that people come together. And when it gets hard, we need to do that as a community. We need to remember that in him we have all we need. That he is our comforter through those valleys. But also to remember that we are blessed even to overflowing. And when we do that, and when we join together, and God joins with us, we're able not to go over it, not to go under it, but to go through it and come out praising his name. Let's pray. Lord, it perhaps seems like a heavy session, this one, but sometimes it is important to stop and talk about those things that maybe are a bit private, a bit personal, or a bit difficult. Lord, no one can really answer that question of why we suffer or why we have to go through what we go through. But Lord, no one can really answer the question of why you love us anyway. And so, Lord, we pray that whatever we are going through, wherever we are, that we would cling to that love that went beyond the grave and came out conquering evil. Lord, listen to our tears, listen to our moans, listen to our groans. But may we also listen to you and know that you are there with us each and every step, and bring us to that place where we can look back and be thankful for the journey you've taken us on, that we may indeed just be closer to you and to your love. In Jesus' name, amen.